In the 1980s, were Rush the hard rock version of the pop band The Police? Check out my review now for Grace Under Pressure. Welcome back to Rocker's Beer Review, and today we're going to be reviewing the album by Rush, Grace Under Pressure. This is the album from the 1980s. Now, Rush are one of my favourite bands, and they don't really need much of an introduction if you're into hard rock and heavy metal music. This is a Canadian band. They've released 19 studio albums, and that is spanning over a period of 5 decades. The first album came out in 1974, with the last in 2012. As I mentioned, today's album review is actually their 10th, and it's probably, in my opinion, their most accessible. The album we're going to be reviewing is Grace Under Pressure, released in 1984. This is, in my opinion, the best entry point for any person who doesn't know Rush. But let me tell me first about the band itself. They're a three-piece with Geddy Lee on vocals, bass and keyboards, Alex Lifeson on guitars, and Neil Peart on drums and percussion. This is the definitive lineup. Since their original drummer, actually John Rutsey, he left the band shortly after they released their first album and just prior to them going on a full US tour. For me, I got into Rush quite late on, really, as they never really clicked with me, and that's probably due to mainly to Geddy Lee's vocals. They are a bit of an acquired taste. But also, unlike a lot of their sort of peers of the time, they really like to transform themselves from album to album, and their sound has very much changed from the 70s to 80s and 90s, where the 70s they were very much a progressive rock band with lots of long instrumental parts. The 80s they went more sort of pop and hard rock. And in the 90s, they became more of a straight-ahead sort of guitar-based hard rock band. They even started in the 1970s as a little bit of seen as being a bit like the Canadian version of Led Zeppelin. So their 80s stuff leads with a bit more of a synth sound. They introduced much more sort of contemporary music at the time, adding pop, ska, even a little bit of reggae. And that, to me, makes them much more of an interesting band. But it also made it quite difficult to actually find the best entry point. But Grace Under Pressure was actually one of the first albums that I listened to back to back. And that came pretty much in the slap bang in the midpoint of their career. Released in 1984. It is still to this day my favourite Rush album, and it's certainly one of the most accessible for any new fans that checking out the band for the very first time. Geddy's vocals, which as I mentioned are a little bit of an acquired taste, are much more sort of restrained on this album. In this album though, they are quite high in the mix. They sound much more mature and less forced than some of his wailing that he did in some of the 70s. They're also much more straight-ahead rock songs, no long instrumentals or overblown pieces, which again they favoured more in the 70s. It's more about great songs with catchy hooks and great melodies. And although there are a lot of keys and synths, I don't think they're as overblown as they were in the album that came after this, Power Windows, or even the album after that, Hold Your Fire. Alex Lifeson here as a guitar player has a much cleaner, sort of almost icy tone to his playing, and I think it's a great highlight. It really highlights his lead and rhythm playing in this album, and it also shows that as a lead guitarist he's pretty underrated. Lyrically, the album is the tone of it is quite dark, with lots of talk. There's lots of the subject matter being a lot about war, especially the Cold War, but also about the World War II and the Holocaust. There's a little bit about the environment as well. And I think really the sort of tones and the subject matters of these albums were very topical of that time in 1984, and a lot more politically charged than maybe some of their other albums. It's hardly their heaviest album though, even though the subject matter is quite dark. The overall songwriting is very strong on this album, with much more breezy sing along sort of choruses, and it's chock full of grooves and real great guitar licks as well. You can tell that they were heavily influenced by their contemporaries of the time. I mentioned at the beginning of this video the comparisons with the Police. They do sound like a hard rock version of the Police, in my opinion. But there's also parts of sort of Talking Heads in there, and even early U2 in these albums. They sort of continue the use of a little bit of reggae and ska elements. Probably less so than their previous album Signals, but they are still there within the mix. Some of the songs even sound like reggae up versions of a hard rock anthems. So in terms of the key tracks, it's quite hard to pick out the best songs on there, because I think overall the album is such a strong one. Opener, Distant Early Warning, and After Image that comes after it are certainly two really great songs, and I really like The Enemy Within with its sort of reggae type beat. And if any band can make a chorus where you repeat the Morse code as being great, then Rush need to be applauded, because the Body Electric, they do just that. It's a great solo on that song too. But for me, the best song on the album is actually Save Till Last. Between the Wheels, it starts off with a real heavy sort of keyboard sound before exploding into a really great bridge and chorus. I think Geddy Lee here is really sound as best as he ever can on any other album. And to me, it's probably my favourite song. But one thing that is really great about this song is Alex Lifeson's solo. It's probably his best solo, I think. I ask any other Rush fan to come up with a solo that you think is better than this. It's full of emotion. He's just got real great tone. Now, so far I haven't really mentioned much about the drummer Neil Peart. Now, he also writes all the lyrics for all the Rush songs. And to many people out there, certainly my friends that are drummers, he is he's probably the number one drummer in terms of the hard rock and heavy metal. He doesn't get mentioned that much on this review, mainly because I think his playing is a little bit more restrained. There's no sort of over-the-top playing. It's just really, really solid. He's still a great drummer. He still adds that extra element. I mean, after all, they are a three-piece, so the drum sign really comes into it. I think that, and I think a lot of people will also agree with me that his drumming is superb, but there are better examples of his drum skills on other albums opposed to this one. But I think you should always commend a drummer that can really sort of doesn't need to showcase his virtuosity on an album and just lets the songs speak for themselves. So, Grace Under Pressure, I think, is a great introduction to Rush. I mean, some people may argue that Moving Pictures is better, but for me, this is the Rush album that I listen to the most, and is certainly my favourite of their 80s era albums. So, I hope you enjoyed this review of Rush's Grace Under Pressure. Now, let's review some beer. Okay, so now we're going to be reviewing the beer, and we are reviewing this beer today. It's another Dayer. It's called Something Good. It's an IPA coming in at 6.2% in, as normal, a nice large 500ml can. Now, let's get this beer out of the can. I always have trouble with that bit. Out of the can, into a glass, and see what it's like. Dayer, again, consistently good. I speak to a lot of people on different forums and on Facebook groups, and it's seen to be as like probably one of the most popular breweries in terms of their level of consistently being really good each time. So what we've got here, beer in a glass. I'm just going to put that can there so you can see. It's got a lovely artwork again, and again they use these crocodiles on a lot of their cans. Nice and bright, nice and summery. So beer in a glass. I'm sitting here and I can smell already those really fresh fruity smells. But let's get some proper aroma, shall we? Yeah, it's really, really fresh, really, really fruity. Big pineapple, mango, passion fruit. There's a little bit of grapefruit there, yeah, and citrus flavors as well. It's just a fruit bowl of of aromas there, and I'm really looking forward to it. I hope it's going to taste as good as it smells. It looks really great. You've got a nice sort of cloudy sort of hazy yellowy orange sort of colour. You've only got a small one finger head, but anyway, let's get it down, shall we? Cheers, everyone. Yeah, lovely sort of pineapple taste, really strong pineapple taste, but again, it's very fresh pineapple. It's not the sort of pineapple chunks, the sweets. It's not the tin pineapple, that's syrupy sweetness. It's just a real fresh fruity taste. There's a little bit of mango in there. There's other sort of tropical notes that are really they sort of come and go in terms of the flavour, because really to me it's all about the pineapple. It's quite dry. I can feel the moisture being sucked out of my mouth again. No bitterness at all. Really nice soft mouthfeel. It's another great winner from Daya. Carbonation, fairly low levels, but there's that real freshness, and it's so drinkable. 6.2% though. It's quite, it's reasonably alcoholic. Let's see what sort of does it tell me what hops it's got in it? Certainly doesn't look like it. Just says naturally soft, hazy and juicy. Yeah, I mean, it says here something good is a citrus delight, taking a fruity IPA and adding orange, pink grapefruit and lemon zest. Yeah, I think there is some pink grapefruit in there, and there is obviously citrusy flavours in there to keep that really fresh. It's dry hopped with Sabro, Muteca, lemon drop, which is quite interesting that they got that extra thing in. So it does look like it's got some adjuncts in it that gives it that fruitier flavour, but to be honest, it doesn't taste artificial. It tastes fresh. It tastes like you're getting those flavours from the hops and not from anything artificial. But they've obviously found the need to put a little bit more in there. I think for me, the mouthfeel again just makes it so soft. It just sort of sits on the palate and then just sort of rolls down the throat, and really, really juicy. Really, really fresh. I've said these words many times: juicy, fresh, but this is what it is. This is another lovely beer, and in fact, I'd almost go far to say this is probably my favourite Daya beer. And we've tried quite a few on this channel, but this to me is probably just everything works. The balance is really right. It's not overpowering. The pineapple is there. Sometimes the pineapple can be a bit overpowering, but it's just a nice, mellow sort of pineapple flavour. Nice aromas, looks great, definitely the part. So let's get some scores in, shall we? Welcome back. The scores are in for Daya Something Good. So straight away, aroma. Really, really nice. Pineapple, tropical aromas, really fresh, really great. I'm giving it 15 out of 20 for aroma. Next is the appearance. Well, look, it's a lovely yellow haziness. You can see the nice lacing up the glass there. It doesn't retain its head too much, but it doesn't need to really, because it's got such a soft mouthfeel there. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10 for appearance. Flavour. This has got the balance of flavours on this beer are just really good. There's nothing too overpowering. It's not too. There's little or no bitterness. The dryness is there, but it's not overpowering. It's fresh tasting. It's not overly sweet. The pineapple flavour is there, but it doesn't sort of overpower. I think it's a really great balanced IPA, and it's, as an IPA goes, it's probably one of the best examples that I've had. So I'm giving it a 36 out of 40 for flavour. Value for money, well, we love Daya because it comes in great big 500ml cans, So I'm giving it 9 out of 10 for value for money. Cost just under £5 for this can. And then overall experience, well, I've really enjoyed this. I could sit and drink 3 or 4 of these. Really, really great. It's just really well balanced, and it's got all the flavours, and it just, you can get some IPAs that have got, there's a little bit too much bitterness, or the flavour just doesn't quite it isn't quite right. But this, great mouthfeel, good levels of carbonation without being overpowering, really fresh, not too sweet, not too sour, not too bitter. It's just really well balanced. So I'm giving it a 16 out of 20. So we top those scores up and we're getting a total, wait for it, it's an Iron Maiden, it's an 84. Cheers everyone. 84 out of 100, another great beer from Daya. You see Daya, you know, they've released about 4 or 5 even just this week. So I think that, you know, it's worth trying a Daya. Whichever one you try, they're all going to be good. There's probably never a bad one. But if there's a bad one, there's one to avoid, let me know in the comments. So it's actually National IPA Day today. So cheers everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoyed the IPA. You having an IPA today. Until the next review, keep on rocking.